Welcome to the debate. When structural engineers design massive skyscrapers, they don't just pour concrete and stack steel until the building is completely rigid.
Right, that would be a complete disaster.
Exactly. It would snap. They intentionally engineer flexibility into the foundation and the framework. The building actually has to sway in high winds, or the atmospheric pressure will cause the entire structure to just break apart.
It's counterintuitive, right? The capacity to absorb turbulence and remain centered is actually what keeps a structure standing.
It is. But see, we often build our careers the exact opposite way, with absolute rigidity. We obsess over the next promotion, the next salary bump, the next big title.
Yeah, we build upward with this really intense focus on those external milestones.
Right, and when the inevitable turbulence hits, the structure fractures. But our source material today, it offers this radical opposing formula for, I guess you'd call it, professional structural integrity. It claims, and this is the core of what we're looking at today, when the mind is calm, decisions become wise. And when decisions are wise, success naturally finds its way to you.
It is an incredibly powerful sequence. Calmness yields wisdom, wisdom yields right action, and then right action acts as a magnet for success rather than something you have to, frantically chase down.
Exactly. But the central question we have to grapple with is how this formula interacts with the reality of professional drive. So is ambition the enemy of that piece, or is it its most vital catalyst?
And that is exactly where you and I look at this material and see two very different things.
We really do. Because I look at this foundational formula, and I immediately see a glaring contradiction. Ambition, just by its very nature, it forces us to attach our identity and our emotional state to future outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
It inherently pulls us out of the present, which, well, it makes that prerequisite inner peace virtually impossible. I'll be arguing that ambition actively hinders this process.
And I completely disagree with that read. I'll be arguing that I see ambition as the necessary engine for that exact peace. I think you are sort of confusing peace with apathy here.
I wouldn't call it apathy, but go on.
Well, the framework we're exploring today, it doesn't demand passive acceptance. It requires a really rigorous emotional discipline that we have to use to manage our ambition, to learn from our shortcomings and continuously drive better performance.
I see why you might read it that way. But let's actually look at the psychology here. The underlying philosophy explicitly warns us against tying our identity solely to a job or a position or a salary.
Right. The material is very clear on that.
Yeah, it is. Yet ambition, as it actually functions in the human psyche, is precisely a fixation on those exact external markers. You really cannot separate ambition from, the desire for the promotion.
I think you can, actually.
Well, let's think about the brain for a second. When you're ambitious, you're essentially hijacking your own brain's reward circuitry. When you fixate on a future milestone, let's say making partner at your firm, your brain literally withholds the neurochemical reward of dopamine until that milestone is hit.
Okay, bringing in the neurochemistry, I see.
Right, because it matters. You make yourself chemically incapable of feeling calm in the present task. You're literally engineering your own dissatisfaction. The formula states that concentration on the current task is the biggest key to success, but ambition violently pulls the mind out of that present moment.
That is a fascinating way to frame the neurochemistry, but I really think you're misapplying it to the author's framework. The desire to look at a failure, to analyze it, and then focus on better performance, which is an explicit instruction we are given in the text, that is the literal definition of ambition.
But doesn't that focus on better inherently mean looking away from the now?
Not necessarily. What this philosophy does brilliantly is separate the result of the job from the internal state of the worker. You can possess a fierce, driving ambition to fulfill your responsibility while utilizing a calm mind purely as a strategic tool.
A strategic tool?
Yes. The ambition sets the destination, right? And the calm mind is the mechanism of travel. It's what allows you to make decisions based on reason rather than erratic emotions when you inevitably hit roadblocks.
I have to stop you there because the mechanics of human attention just don't really allow for that kind of clean separation. Our source material tells us that work pressure is natural, but that peace of mind is in our own hands.
Which is empowering.
It is, but let's think of this like a tightrope walker. To survive, the walker must look only at their feet, step by step. That is the current task.
Okay, I'm tracking with the analogy.
You are suggesting that we can somehow be staring intently at the platform, at the end of the rope, the promotion, the exit event, the big raise, while simultaneously maintaining a perfect, meditative focus on our feet. Doesn't constantly looking at the destination, which ambition absolutely demands, doesn't that inherently destroy the present moment concentration required to make those wise decisions?
I come at it from a completely different direction. Let's stick with your tightrope analogy, actually. You literally cannot move forward if you don't know where the platform is.
Well, you can take a step.
But to where? The material includes an explicit instruction to move forward with the team. How do you move forward without a cardinal direction? Keeping the mind calm doesn't mean pretending the platform at the end of the tightrope just doesn't exist.
But if you look at it, you fall.
No, it means accepting a stumble on the wire without immediately internalizing the thought, I am a total failure. Ambition tells you which rope to walk on. It provides the initial motivation to step out over the void in the first place.
I just think ambition makes the void way more terrifying.
But without the ambition to reach the other side, the instruction to focus on better performance becomes completely meaningless. You just stand on the starting platform forever, feeling, very peaceful, but accomplishing absolutely nothing.
Getting on the rope might simply be the fulfillment of a responsibility, though, which is fundamentally different from ambition. You can do your job diligently because it's your duty without hungering for the platform at the end.
That sounds like a very robotic way to work.
Maybe. But let's build on this idea of the tightrope walker and look at the actual environment of the modern workplace. Your tightrope analogy really only works if the walker is alone in a perfectly silent room.
Right, which the workplace never is.
Exactly. What happens when the wind picks up? What happens when there's a crowd beneath you, and half of them are cheering while the other half are yelling that your form is terrible?
Ah, you mean the daily feedback loop of the corporate world?
Precisely. We are explicitly warned in the text that praise shouldn't increase our ego, and criticism shouldn't decrease our self-confidence, and here is why I argue ambition is completely corrosive to that balance.
Let's hear it.
Ambition makes us hypersensitive to praise and criticism because we view them as primary metrics of our progress toward our goal. Imagine a listener who has just spent 6 months grinding, working 70-hour weeks for a director title.
We've all been there.
Right. If their identity is tied to that ambition, every single critique they receive from their manager feels like an existential threat to their future, and every piece of praise feels like a massive acceleration, which just inflates their ego.
It's a roller coaster.
It is. And this emotional volatility clouds our ability to make decisions with the wisdom and reason the sequence actually demands. When you want the goal that badly, you just cannot be objective about the feedback.
I hear what you're saying about the toxic side of corporate climbing. I really do. But you are equating all drive with narcissistic ambition. Let's be a bit more precise with our definitions here.
Fair enough. How would you define it?
Well, selfish ambition certainly creates that fragile ego. I'll grant you that entirely. But the framework mandates that we leave ego and build strong relationships through humility, cooperation, and respect.
Which ambition fights against?
Not collective ambition. It introduces the concept of the drive to move forward with the team. That requires immense humility.
But how does that play out when you miss the promotion?
That's exactly it. If you miss that director promotion after 6 months of grinding, narcissistic ambition tells you to burn the place down, right? Or spiral into depression. But collective ambition, paired with a calm mind, allows you to sit in the Monday morning meeting, swallow your pride, and ask, where did my performance fall short, and how can I improve?
That's incredibly difficult to do.
It is, but decisions made with a calm mind aren't devoid of ambition. They're simply devoid of the destructive ego that usually accompanies it. Ambition is a desire to build something great. Ego is the demand that you receive all the credit for it.
You can't just mandate humility on a corporate level and expect the ego to vanish, though. I mean, you're completely ignoring human nature and the psychological reality of the corporate ladder.
I don't think I'm ignoring it. I think the text is providing a solution to it.
But when you are pouring your life energy into a specific career goal, The ego is always in the driver's seat. It's an evolutionary survival mechanism. When resources are scarce, and executive titles are definitely scarce resources, we are wired to compete fiercely for them.
But the whole point of this philosophical framework is to override that primitive evolutionary wiring. It's asking us to evolve past the reaction of the lizard brain that says missed promotion equals death.
And I'm arguing that ambition is the very fuel of that lizard brain, which honestly brings us to the deepest philosophical point we have to wrestle with today.
The identity piece.
Yes, we are given this highly inspiring yet incredibly difficult directive. Identify yourself not by your job, but by your true self. I posit that true ambition inevitably makes the job, or at least the pursuit of professional mastery, your primary identity.
It doesn't have to, though.
But enmeshment occurs naturally. If you're an ambitious startup founder, your company is you. If the company fails, ambition ensures you feel like a failure. It violates the guidance entirely. How can you possibly separate your core self-respect from the results of your labor when ambition demands that you care so deeply about the outcome?
You do it through the psychological practice of outcome independence. You are ignoring the dual mandate that sits at the very core of this philosophy.
A dual mandate?
Yes, the text is incredibly precise on this. It states, your work is your responsibility, but your peace, self-respect, and self-confidence should not depend solely on the result of the job. That right there is the ultimate proof that ambition and peace are intended to coexist.
It sounds contradictory, though.
It's paradoxical, maybe, but not contradictory. It acknowledges the heavy burden of responsibility. You must pursue the work vigorously, but it demands that you build an internal firewall.
An internal firewall? Well, that is a great theoretical concept. But how does a professional actually build one? The more you want the outcome, the hotter the fire burns against that wall.
It takes practice.
But when the venture capital funding falls through, or you get passed over for the role you totally deserved, how does this hypothetical firewall hold up against the very real psychological devastation?
Okay, you build the firewall by fundamentally redefining your internal metrics for success, even while pursuing those external goals. Let me explain how this works in practice.
Please do.
Think of a highly ambitious professional walking into a high-stakes negotiation. Their external ambition is to close a multi-million-dollar deal, but their internal metric for success, the thing that actually feeds their self-respect, is simply, did I prepare exhaustively? Did I communicate clearly? Did I manage my emotions when the client pushed back?
Okay, process goals over outcome goals.
Exactly. Those are factors entirely within their control. The results of the job, whether the client signs the contract, is on the other side of the firewall. If the client walks away due to market conditions, the ambitious professional is disappointed, yes, but their self-confidence isn't shattered because they met their internal metrics.
It protects the ego.
It protects the true self. They fiercely pursue the responsibility, innovating and pushing for better performance, while maintaining a strict, disciplined boundary that protects their true self from the variable outcomes of the market. The calm mind isn't a fragile state you protect from ambition. It is the robust tool you use to manage it.
I appreciate the distinction between internal execution metrics and external outcome metrics. It sounds, honestly, very stoic, but I still maintain that ambition, in its purest form, cares only about the outcome.
Really? Only the outcome?
Yes. If you are perfectly content with losing the deal as long as you communicated clearly, I would argue you aren't actually ambitious. You're just conscientious. Ambition hungers for the result. And when we introduce that hunger, that future fixation, we disrupt the delicate psychological ecosystem required for true wisdom.
But conscientiousness alone doesn't change the world. Conscientiousness maintains the status quo. Ambition pushes the boundaries of what is actually possible.
Give me an example.
Think of the scientific method. A scientist must be relentlessly ambitious to cure a disease. They work for decades, but they must also be deeply, profoundly calm and objective when analyzing the data.
Because if they aren't,
Right, if their ambition biases their reading of a failed experiment, if they let their ego demand that the hypothesis is right despite the evidence, they cease to be a good scientist. Their decisions are no longer wise. The ambition drives the decades of labor, The calm mind ensures that daily decisions are rooted in reality.
That is a compelling example, but notice what happens in your scenario. The scientist's ambition is directed toward discovering a truth, which is a noble collective good.
True.
That aligns much better with the concept of moving forward with the team. But what happens when we apply this to the listener sitting in a corporate cubicle, whose ambition is simply to make an extra $50,000 a year so they can buy a bigger house?
The stakes are different, but the mechanism is the same.
I don't know. That is the ambition I'm talking about, the desire for external, material validation. When that is the goal, the mind cannot be calm because the mind is constantly calculating threats to that acquisition.
I actually think that the framework holds up perfectly even in that corporate scenario. If the listener in the cubicle is consumed by the anxiety of acquiring that $50,000, they are going to make terrible decisions.
Exactly.
Right. They'll backstab colleagues, hoard information, burn out, and they will likely alienate the very managers who control their promotion. Their mind is chaotic, their decisions are foolish, and success will actively avoid their path.
We agree on that.
But if that same listener applies outcome independence, if they say, I am ambitious, I want that promotion, but my core identity is not tied to it, they become an incredibly effective employee. They collaborate, they take constructive criticism without getting defensive, they solve problems creatively. Because their mind is calm, their decisions become wise. And ironically, the byproduct of that wise behavior is that they become the obvious candidate for the promotion. Success naturally finds its way to them.
You're painting a picture of an almost enlightened corporate worker. And, well, while I admire the ideal, I think it glosses over the friction. To truly operate that way requires a suppression of the very drive that gets most people into the competitive arena in the first place.
I call it channeling, not suppression.
Well, my position remains that the source material points toward a more organic professional progression. True success is presented as a natural byproduct of a calm, present-focused mind. By injecting the striving, the hunger, and the future obsession of ambition, we contaminate the process.
We'll just have to disagree on the contamination part.
We inflate the ego with praise, we shatter self-confidence with criticism, and we inextricably tie our fundamental identity to corporate outcomes over which we have absolutely no ultimate control.
And I fundamentally disagree with that premise because it frames the calm mind as something weak that has to be shielded from the realities of the world. This philosophy is not a manifesto for professional retreat.
No, it's certainly not that.
It is a rigorous, demanding framework for high performance. It openly acknowledges failures, missed promotions, and workplace pressure as absolute certainties of the human experience. Therefore, by separating our self-worth from our outcomes, we actually free ourselves to be more ambitious. We can take calculated risks based on reason rather than fear. We can fail, calmly assess the wreckage, and start building again.
Despite our deeply different interpretations of ambition's role, there is a profound point of convergence in how we are reading this material.
Oh, where's that?
I think we completely agree on the core warning regarding the mechanics of decision-making itself. Whenever our professional life triggers intense emotional volatility, whether that's the ego inflation of a massive win that makes us think we're invincible, or a crisis of self-worth that makes us think I am a complete failure after a loss, our capacity to make correct decisions is fundamentally compromised.
Absolutely. On that mechanism, the logic is absolutely undeniable. The moment emotion overtakes reason, the sequence breaks. The mind is no longer calm. The decisions are no longer wise, and success stops searching for your path.
It's a chain reaction.
It is. You become blind to the right actions because you're blinded by your own internal narrative. If there is one indisputable takeaway, it's that emotional regulation is the ultimate competitive advantage in any professional arena.
It is a remarkable piece of philosophy exactly because it forces us to hold up a mirror to our own daily grind. It challenges the default settings of modern work culture.
It really demands introspection.
It does. Listeners will have to deeply examine their own careers and their internal states on Monday morning. You have to look at your own behavior and ask yourself, is your relentless drive for success actively disrupting the peace required to actually achieve it?
Is the dopamine chase making you unwise?
Exactly. Or Is your cultivated piece the very foundation that allows your ambition to manifest naturally and sustainably? We leave you to consider whether you are staring so hard at the platform at the end of the tightrope that you've completely forgotten to look at your feet.